Welcome to The Truth About Ag. Well, I guess I get to start today, guys, because I'm pretty sure once I get these two started, you're not going to hear me much for the rest of it. So this is the Truth About Ag podcast. As she mentioned, my name's Evan Shout, my co-host Kristjan Hebert, and a special guest. And she's not even sweating yet, so this is good. So just, I'm going to start with a little story. So FCC likes to keep pretty close tabs on Justine, so they asked for a list of questions. And if anybody's watched our podcast, we don't do questions. So Kristjan nicely sends them a list, and as I'm reading through it, I'm going, there's no way he's asking any of these questions. And then I get here today and look at Justine, and she goes, there's no way he's asking any of these questions. So for those that know us, we are going to free this one, and I guess I get to start. So I hear FCC's moving to Ottawa.
I thought you were going to say Montreal, Evan.
Pick one.
Well, actually, the latest that I heard, I was going to tell, I forgot to tell Kristjan, is I got a call from his dad a couple of weeks ago. And last time I was over, he said, you know, Justine, the homestead where Kristjan grew up, like we're kind of thinking of doing something different. So I said, is it for sale? Maybe I could move half of the head office up to Mooseman. That'd be an interesting move, right? I'd have your dad run the operation. But no, we are not moving from Regina in terms of head office. This has been interesting to see how the rumor mill's been going on. It's been quite entertaining, but as I said yesterday, we're pretty adamant about that. We've been here since the 90s. There's like over 1,000 employees here. It makes a lot of sense for us to be headquartered here, but we also want to kind of maintain our footprint across Canada. So you two won't get rid of me that fast.
I was going to say, I don't know if Louis could sell the homestead anymore because the story in Mooseman is that the Chinese bought it.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe we have a little problem.
And my answer, same thing I said at home, is unless they bought out Connexus Credit Union. I haven't heard the story myself yet. But, so I guess let's make sure that everybody understands this. We ended up on the podcast because I have an immense amount of respect for Justine. Evan would have the number better than I do. I think I borrow 1% of my total debt from FCC, and my total debt number is pretty big. And so what happened is a mutual friend, I think it was Kim McConnell, introduced us and said, you two need to talk, right? And Justine came out to the farm. We've had a bunch of discussions since, and we'll roll into those. But the question I really want to ask you, everyone knows I'm very politically correct, so I tried to think of the right way to ask it, but I don't know how. So, how did you get picked or chosen for the job of CEO of FCC? And the reason I would say that is, in my brain, when I picture a typical agriculture banker from Western Canada, like a little black French-speaking lady from Ottawa that grew up in Montreal, like it's not the first thing that comes to my mind.
Really? Come on.
Edit.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Is that what I'm supposed to answer? The politically correct answer? So, and folks, don't worry. Kristjan and I talked about this before. So, and I love your candor. So it's all good. And it's a fair one. I'm probably not the typical person you would expect to first bid for a job like this, or even to be remotely successful at it. I'm a city girl at heart, right? That now finds herself in a totally different sector. So the Reader's Digest answer to that, Kristjan, would be, well, one, I think the experience I have with 17 years in exports, so I worked in another crown before, had a stint in doing some stuff in ag equipment. So I used to go to Russia with the MacDon guys and all of that stuff. And just kind of understanding Canada's competitiveness abroad, I think played a part. I'm pretty good with customers. I think you invited me back, so I was able to ride in a cab with your dad. So I figured that was not too bad in terms of winning the Hebert family over. And, you know, at the end of the day, with the financing background that I have, hopefully the combination of those three meant that the sector, and there was a nice opportunity at FCC. They wanted to see what we could do a bit differently, so they said, hey, why don't you come in and see what you can do? So that's kind of, I think, how I ended up here.
Yeah, and I mean, and I wouldn't disagree. I'd go back through some of the meetings we've had. And I mean, once again, I usually sugarcoat questions to Justine. So first time I met her, I said, like, what is your plan? Because I don't really always know that your number one shareholder is aligned with my ideas for agriculture. And I'm assuming everybody in the crowd would understand that's the federal government, which currently right now, myself and them are quite aligned on no issues. But I said, like, what's your plan? And Justine, to be honest, she caught me off guard because you were 9 months into the job at the time. And her exact answer back was, like, obviously she has to run a business and there needs to be a profit. And there's a percentage of that profit that has to be returned. But there's also a percentage that needs to be invested in the future of the industry. And her exact question back is, I think we can invest more in the industry. Part of the reason we're talking is, if you were me, where would you invest it? So we're trying to have the best agriculture industry a decade from now or 20 years from now. What do we have to put it in? Because obviously, us farmers in the crowd will say, well, just dock 2 points off the interest rate. Well, there's banking regulations that you can't physically do that. But things like investing in venture cap, private equity on innovation and on education, right? And research, those are all the things that we talked about.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's been a bunch announced here in the last
48 hours.
48 hours, right? That I think it's pretty interesting to watch. And so I'd lead into my next question. I think you guys call it the placemat, right? Yeah. That's your mission, vision, goal.
Yeah.
Like, give us a little story on Justine's stamp on the placemat of FCC and how you envision the future.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Kristjan. Before I go there, maybe a couple of things I wanted to share is, so it has been kind of 15 months that I've been on the job. I didn't waste any time, right? I tried to go as much out to see the customers, employees, stakeholders, and my number one goal was to kind of understand and get the vibe for what was going on, right? And if I was to take a step back and say, so what did I hear? Lots of excitement for the sector. And I mentioned earlier when I was at EDC, I got a chance to dabble into the sector. And funny enough, when I got the job, somebody at EDC sent me a note and said, Justine, it's kind of funny that you're now going to be in charge of FCC. Because when we were sitting together in Russia after we finished this big ag show, I had actually turned over to the staff and said, you know what? I think I have the best job at EDC because I think this is the best sector in the world. And he says, look at you 11 years later, you're going to go be in charge of it. So I guess the moral of that story is be careful what you say because people do pay attention. So here I am and engaging with lots of stakeholders. And, there's two things that I heard loud and clear. One was, can you actually help tell the story, right? And you and I talked about that. And I know, Evan, when we had dinner, all of us together. So that was one of the things that I heard. And then the other one was, FCC, we need you to do more, right? And I heard that across the country. So with that, came back. We did some outside in view, kind of continued to engage, and this is kind of where the placemat came from. So the tagline to the placemat, that's the new strategy for FCC, starts off by ag and food needs all of us, right? And it starts with FCC, but really what that's meant to say is we need to partner, right, with those in the industry, those outside of the industry. And if we're all going at it, hoping that we're going to solve it all, we're going to lose before we even got started. So that's kind of the thing behind that. And then if I was to take 3 words to summarize what we're trying to do, it's we're trying to be bold, we're trying to be a catalyst, and we're trying to be resilient. So when you talk, for example, of the investments we've made in the last couple of days that we announced, that's FCC being a catalyst. So if we, with some of our investments in GIST, for example, can bring stakeholders to the table to invest for something that's going to pay off in the future, we want to play a part in that. When we're talking about being bold, it means we're known out there for being senior secured lenders. We do that super well. But based on what the needs are, things are changing. So FCC needs to be bold and kind of figure out what those solutions are so we can respond. And the resiliency is not just about investing in the industry, but it's also the resilience of FCC. Because if we're not resilient, we're not going to be able to be there for the long run. So that's kind of at a really, really high level. And that spins off into us investing in our platform, Ag Expert, making sure we're doing stuff in innovation. The other one that I think I know you and I love to talk about is Indigenous and underrepresented groups as an example of how the future of the industry is going to look like, and what can we do as key actors today to kind of make sure that they become huge participants in the industry.
So I just want to jump in because the first one you said was telling the story of ag. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a break for a second.
Thanks, Evan.
I want to pose that to one of my co-hosts here, is for you to actually tell the crowd, what do you believe the story of ag is? If you could tell it today, and I'm putting you on the spot, what is the story of agriculture in Saskatchewan and Canada today?
Well, I mean, there's no question. I think agriculture is by far the best industry to be in the world. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, right? One is the world needs food, and I try to see positives in everything. So if you had to see a positive in what we learned from COVID, we actually saw some shelves go empty, and it went empty of all the food we grow in this room, not niche products, not stuff that was made in petri dishes, of what grows here, right? So there's the positive there. I think that there's obviously always risk in a commodity business, right? And there's always risk in an old industry, but I don't know about anyone else, but there's hundreds of thousands of jobs available in agriculture right now. I think it's not just employment on a farm, right? You can be a mechanic, you can be a truck driver, you can be a scientist, you can be a salesperson. I don't care if you work for FCC, for My Farm, for John Deere, for Bayer, right? There's all kinds of opportunity for every education stream. And I think we're still lucky enough in Canada that a lot of people are only 1, 2, 3 generations from the farm, that they still remember it, that we can capture that opportunity to bring them back, right? You go to the US or you go to Europe where they're 7, 8, 9, 10 generations away. Like, I got friends in the US that a quarter section, they had to sign leases with 10 different people because it's 5 generations old. The farm doesn't mean anything to them. They still think bread comes from Sobeys, not from wheat, right? So, I think in Canada we have a huge opportunity there. And I mean, I'm a recovering accountant by trade. I mean, Dean, one of my old mentors, is in the crowd, and I tell this story very often. Like when I was at the firm and I was going to leave to go farming, like I got a number of phone calls to say, have you lost your mind? Why would you quit being a chartered accountant to go farming, right? And I got to give Dean credit, and I had another mentor named Roy. Both of them said, can't believe we kept you this long. Get out of here, right? Show them you're right. But I didn't leave because I thought land was going to quadruple in value. I mean, that's been kind of handy, right? But at the time, that's not what I believed,
So far.
right? What I believed was the opportunity in agriculture was endless. It was the oldest industry in the world, and I had seen all these little snippets from other industries that we hadn't employed. We hadn't got a good job on HR and running farms as shifts and projects. We hadn't looked at innovative financing. We hadn't looked at innovative insurance because the only thing available was crop insurance. There were so many areas that I thought there was opportunity that, to be honest, my hardest problem when I went back into agriculture was finding time to sleep because there was that much going on.
Well, and I could probably second that. I mean, I kind of did the same trek as him, except I followed him instead of doing it on my own. So when I left, I think it was the biggest thing was agriculture is still behind what I call other industries. So we have so much room to grow, so much movement to change. And that's what excited me, was that we weren't in an industry that has already done it all and seen it all. We're in an industry that's still growing. And I mean, we see it in tech, obviously being here today, and we see it in a lot of areas, and it's just the opportunities are endless. And so far the road's been fun, so.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd like to pivot a bit to is, so, if you've paid attention to the show at all, there's been some pretty good announcements from FCC. And Justine, you're too humble sometimes, to be honest, right? So she glanced over pretty quickly GIFS, which is the Global Institute of Food Security. Minister Merritt's in the crowd. So, I mean, it was the original idea of I believe, of the government and Nutrien to show a lot of stuff about Saskatchewan and Western Canadian food and agriculture. I see Alana's out here. She chairs I think you chair the board and the advisory board. So it's very farmer involved. There was a report that they released right before COP28 in Dubai that literally showed virtually every commodity we grow in Saskatchewan, we are the best in the world. And if we're not the best in the world, the only place that beats us is a little portion of Australia. And the reason for that is Australia has the same kind of percentage of acres under zero till as we do. But that's not the story that we hear everywhere. We don't hear it in Canada. We don't hear it in the globe. We don't hear it anywhere. Like arguably, and I do a show of hands, but this light is so bright in my eyes, I can't see you anyway. Like arguably, I would assume if I asked, is there any farmers in this room that get frustrated when they hear the word sustainable? I would assume most farms would put their arm up, right? But the reason we're frustrated is because marketing companies have stole it from us. Because we are sustainable. Zero till was created here. We are literally the best in the world at almost every crop that we grow. I can't even remember, like the pea and canola and lentil number is off the charts how much better we are. So arguably, Team Canada,
Yeah.
we're going to debate this later, Team Canada, should be out there selling more commodities than we've ever sold in the entire lifetime of our nation to build infrastructure, to build a rainy day fund for the future, right? And that was my most interesting thing about being in Dubai, actually. I'm not saying I agree with everything that goes on there, but like, their leadership structure is okay if your leader has a pretty good vision. I'm not saying I ethically agree with everything.
Are you talking about the Dubai leadership?
Yeah.
Okay, let's not go there, Kristjan.
But the one point that was interesting is they had a whole bunch of oil. They sold it to invest in their country. They invested in infrastructure. They invested in banking. They invested in tourism. There's a bunch of stuff I don't like too. But they took what they had and what they were good at to invest in a future for the next generations. And I think as we pivot and work through this, gifts was the first step of us investing to tell the story of how good we are, so that not only we will keep improving, we have to, it's what we do, but let's start to pivot. We can start here, but it has to be pivot all of Team Canada. Like, let's sell we're on stage, but I'm me. Like, let's sell the shit out of everything we're good at and show the world how good we're at it, and then sell them knowledge, because that's what we're good at, to build a future for our kids and grandkids. I mean, I don't know about anybody else in the crowd, but I mean, your whole being for life is one, leave a better world for your kids, and two, leave better kids for the world.
Yep.
Make every decision on that.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Does he always rant on this long? I know. Yeah. He'd be going on and on. So we started with gifts, we went to the Middle East, and then we're back. So, agree with you for most of it, Kristjan. I think what I'm taking away and what you're saying is, and this is at the heart of who we are as Canadians, we don't do a good job of telling the story. So the beauty about gifts, for one, is I just love the fact, and so one, it represents investing now for the future. It accelerates the ability to get some really tangible solutions for producers, farmers to be able to apply in the short term for long-term results. And what I love is that it's backed by data, because that's one thing I picked up too, is we haven't been really well coordinated to actually bring the data together to tell the story. And I can tell you from my previous life at EDC, when you show up internationally, the maple leaf is fantastic, but when you can put data behind it, you're in it. Well, you were at COP. It's a different ball game. So putting our best foot forward internationally, because we are an exporter, is super important. I don't know, do you want to talk about Team Canada? I know you're dying to talk about it, but we can go there if you want.
Sure.
Ooh, he's going to let me walk into the trap. So maybe I should just stop. Say, Kristjan, what do you think about Team Canada?
That was well played. Yeah, so, I'll give my 2 bits.
Okay, you give your 2 bits, and then I'll pick up the pieces.
So first of all, let's start with the humble side.
Yes.
Because the reason we're going down the Team Canada path is to tell the story. But as agriculture, we have to admit a couple things. Number one, our fierce independence allows us to beat Mother Nature, but it also really tells us to keep all of our stuff inside. We don't even like sharing anything with anybody, right? And the only yield in general we'll share with somebody is if they tell us first, right? So we don't tell the story. Secondly, the companies that are involved in agriculture, like, they're obviously scientific backgrounds, not marketers. Because if we weren't in agriculture and you saw the word fertilizer, herbicide, pesticide, genetically modified, like I don't automatically think of a 2 and 4-year-old child running through that. Like we kind of think of skulls and crossbones.
Yeah.
But we didn't care. We weren't storytellers. It's something that I use to do the job, to grow my crop, to feed you safely. And an hour after I spray my crop, my kids can run through it. I don't mind at all.
Yeah.
I get safe. But we forgot to tell that part, right?
Yeah.
We could have simply went back and said, fertilizer is food, right? Herbicide is a prescription medication. Fungicide's a vitamin. And the plant is my child. So all I do every day is I have 1 million kids. I feed them food. I give them vitamins. If they're sick, I give them a prescription. And at the end of the day, they're healthy. But we didn't start there.
No.
So that's the part agriculture has to own. Now, when it comes to Team Canada,
Yeah.
I believe we agree that the story needs to be consistent across Canada, from every province, the feds, the provinces, the industry, and the farms. 100% agree. Kristjan's going to go on his own personal rant now. I was at COP28.
This whole thing's been
I thought the Global Institute of Food Security report is one of the best things that's happened to Canadian agriculture, like in decades. The only thing that would even compare to it would be the Barton report. And both reports really didn't even ever get mentioned by the federal government. I actually didn't hear anything about the Global Institute of Food Security report in Dubai by anyone from Team Canada unless you were on Team Saskatchewan. So I was super, super, super frustrated. And I believe I told you this.
Yes.
But then, and I can go on my rant on what I think the feds are doing right or wrong, but I'm not going to. I'm going to say that Justine called me out a little bit and said, yeah, but do you think Team Saskatchewan can win the world by itself? Or is it the first step and we have to find a way to unite Team Canada? And the reason it kind of hit me pretty hard is the other thing I heard there that really was troubling is I had a number of trade ministers and a number of companies say, we love Canadian product, we love Saskatchewan product, but as of right now, we are starting to question Canadians' reliability. Reliability around policy,
Yeah.
reliability around being able to load a ship
Yeah.
or use your railroad. And that's a national problem that if we don't fix, if we're not reliable and, I'll use the word, sustainable, we've completely lost our mojo in this industry.
Well, you'll lose it internationally, right? So and you know what? That's what I always enjoy having a good chat with you, because I think most of the time we do agree. Rarely we disagree, but I think we just go at it a different perspective. So my comment to Kristjan was, in my past life, you know, I did a few international trade shows, and I gave the example about Italy, right? You go to some, and you've been to COP, some of these booths are pretty impressive, right? You go in and it's like country first, and then you have all the regions underneath it. But if all the regions split up and then go elsewhere, it becomes super hard for you to sell who you want to be internationally. So I agree, like every province in Saskatchewan's got so much to offer, but 40% of the agricultural land is in this province. So within the own province, you represent such a big part of what Canada is all about. But when we end up spending too much time almost fighting with each other to have our own space, rather than saying, can we put our foot forward together? That's where I think I say, you got to remember Team Canada and what it looks like internationally, because then others are kind of looking at us and saying, is something going on, or are they aligned? And the reality is, as you said, we've got ports and all coasts. You got to cross the country to get the stuff out of the country. So you kind of can't do it on your own unless the others are playing with you. So that's where I think we got to put a balance. And he's starting to laugh. So I think I'm about to get into a lot of trouble.
He's got one more.
No,
Got one
it's
more.
not trouble. I just got a really good question for you.
Okay.
So as you know, I probably care most about people, less about companies and countries. I care about them, but the only way to actually get anything done is to find the right people.
Yeah.
Okay? So we agree on Team Canada.
Yeah.
Like, I'll put my hand up to help tell the story. I was in COP, right?
Yes.
you'll put your hand up to tell the story. You've done it lots.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Give me a couple names on Team Canada in Ottawa that we should be focusing on bettering relations on, because personally, I actually don't think Minister Guilbeault is one of them.
Oh.
And I've tried to have a couple conversations with him.
Yeah.
But my assumption is that in the back of your mind, you have some that you think are, and they might not be in the political spectrum, they might be other national companies. Who are some other allies that maybe aren't specific to agriculture? So I use the environment minister as my example.
Yeah.
Right? But like, who are some other companies or some other big name cabinet ministers that we've done a bad job of explaining our story to get them on our side?
So I don't know that you guys have done a bad job. I don't think you guys have invested enough time. And I say this, tongue in cheek, because there's only so much time in the day. So maybe I'll flip the answer to you this way, which is when you and I first met, or I think, a few weeks back, you and I had an exchange because we actually just got a new deputy minister, right? And I won't tell you what Kristjan texted me, but I said, dude, don't worry, I've got it. And the reason I said that to you is because our new deputy minister, one of the things we've started to do, and I think it's part of the job we can do at FCC, it was to engage more with different departments in Ottawa. And as a result of it, we had already met the deputy minister, right? So that's the benefit of engaging kind of around a sector, is that if a change happens or if there's an indirect impact, we can kind of it's not about access, you can just, you're starting not from day zero, you already have a relationship made. So when you ask me, Justine, who should we talk to? Like, it's hard, if I had two names, I would probably give them to you. But I think it's more about kind of look at the different ministries, and that's what we're doing at FCC. Like transport, to me, is a big ministry that touches ag so much. And even for us at FCC, it probably wouldn't have been a ministry that would have been on our top 5. And I'm being super transparent in front of all these people in your podcast. But, we've tended to really focus on what's pure to ag and food. And we're trying to say, hey, the ecosystem is a little bit bigger. So if we engage with that, we'll have a better way to understand. So that's kind of how I'd answer that.
Let me pull this back before we go too far down the hole. So let's pull politics back. So I more or less want to go back to FCC and go back and say, where do we go from here? What's next?
In terms of?
You tell me.
Oh boy, Evan.
Big picture.
He goes too far down, you don't go far enough, and I'm stuck in the middle. Okay, so.
How are you going to serve the Saskatchewan farmers?
How am I going to serve the Saskatchewan farmers? So, well, I talked a little bit.
That's not very Team Canada of you.
I know. But thank you for that, Kristjan. How are we going to serve is, I talked about the strategy, right? So I said, we got a strategy. We want to be bolder. We know that we need to support all of the Saskatchewan farmers in how they continue, right, to innovate. So how that's going to look like is we're going to come up with new forms of capital. So I mentioned earlier, we've been focused on senior secured lending. That is not going away, period, right? Kind of like the head office is not going away, period. But given what's going on around, either new risks that are emerging, how you fight against some of the climate challenges you've got, we think that we can come up with some neat solutions to help with that. So the what's next is, now that we got the strategy, we've got to queue it up to be able to do it. The other thing maybe, Evan, because you did ask, one of the things that hopefully will benefit folks in the room that you won't necessarily see visibly, but what's happening in the background is, from a company point of view, we decided to actually create an entire vertical just dedicated to innovation. So before, it's the classic, right? Everybody used to do it on the side of their desk. Somebody gets an idea, meets a couple of customers, and now we've got a full team that's all they're gonna do: review our products, augment, tweak, create, remove, all of that. And our goal is to become so much faster to do that. And that's what I'm hoping is gonna be really felt by Saskatchewan and the entire country.
Yeah, and I think from big company standpoint, we all know things move relatively slow. So I like the vertical integration. I mean, obviously we do it on the farm as well. So I'm going to ask you now, same question. Where do you think FCC, or some of the other lenders or other innovations in Saskatchewan need to go moving forward.
Can I divert with one little question I wanted to explain better first?
Go nuts.
So because of the crowd we're with, can you give some numbers around, I think a lot of people in the room would be surprised of how much money FCC has in the world of venture capital, startup capital around agriculture technology and agriculture innovation.
Yeah.
And like not only you've always done it in the history, but it's my understanding that you plan to even ramp it up.
Yeah. So on the ventures, so 15 years ago, FCC used to do direct equity, and then we got out of it and we went more on the venture side. So in the last 15 years, we now have about $500 million in capital out on the venture side. Now what we're doing is we're going to go back to doing direct, and we're going to build a team. Our goal is to be able to get close to having another $1 billion within the next 5 years. So that's part of the commitment. Maybe, Kristjan, what would be worth to give a sense to the crowd, the actual book of FCC is about $52 billion. 85% of that is primary ag, right? 26,000 customers in Saskatchewan, huge part of the book. So we've got a good book, we've got a really strong balance sheet, but we know that there's opportunity to grow, especially in some of those services that are periphery, to make sure that we can all come back to the primary customer and be there to support them. And it's not just financing. So I appreciate the question, because we do advisory. We know transition is a big topic. So we're working on a transition loan solution. How do we get kind of young farmers into the profession? We have a product out there, but we know that it's not hitting the mark. Just based on the market conditions. So those would be examples of things that we're going to tackle. And the whole idea with the vertical around innovation is to not be taking 2 years to get out there. It's more like 6 months.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to bring it up because, I mean, I think as farmers, we always think FCC is just a lender, right? Like, and $1 billion in venture cap, it probably makes you the biggest venture cap investor in the country.
Potentially.
I'd have to ask a few people in the crowd, but that'd be pretty close. Secondly, I think when it comes to that, how you've discussed on moving forward, I mean, most people in the room probably enjoy reading JP's stuff.
They love it.
Right? And did I hear a rumor that he maybe is right beside your right hand now? Did he move in the organization?
Yeah, he got promoted.
Yeah,
he became an executive. Yeah, he's still the chief economist.
Yeah.
But he's in charge of ESG, sustainability, Indigenous. He still has the economics team. And part of the work that he's doing is to really see kind of every dollar FCC puts out there, what's the economic growth impact and so forth. So thanks for asking. He got promoted, all of that, and we were super proud of him.
At least you gave him an easy job description.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, so Evan, I mean, your question on kind of where I think we need to go is, I think Justine explained it right on telling the story. Part of it is having the time to do it, right? The other problem in agriculture is there's so many of us, right? Like, I don't know the exact numbers. StatsCan says there's 186,000 farmers that they want to listen to. I think Kristjan's inside voice says there's 170,000 hobbies because after $10,000 in gross revenue, you can file a T1163 and they'll call you a farmer. It's like voting for the wheat board, to be honest. And there's 16,000 farms, but they don't have much of a voice. And the other thing is I don't know many of the 16,000 farms that aren't really busy. And then on top of that, I mean, I know personally, if you're going to write a check for $10,000 to go to COP28 to tell your story, yes, I paid my own way. I didn't do it just for Hebert Grain Ventures. At a minimum, there's 16,000 farms and a bunch of companies. And so how do we build that investment in telling the story, right? And I think that's where I've had lots of talks with some of the companies, because I think we need to work with governments and companies on this telling the story. Like we've done a pretty good job of organizing money for research and development, and you guys just made another donation on research,
yep,
right, at GIFts. But this telling the story and being Team Canada and Team Agriculture, right? And you're actually starting to see a trend, right? I joked that Justine's maybe not your typical agriculture accountant, but I did it on purpose. The reason I like Justine is she's a pretty normal person. My exact words I use when someone asks me is like, she's a goddamn firecracker. You better be ready when you meet her. But it's because she has lots of
that.
good ideas and she questions the norm. And I love the background you brought from EDC and international. Really, your whole vision was focusing on growth and innovation in the future.
Yeah.
So I give FCC credit for making that move. Another example I'd give would be RBC started up a brand new thought leadership arm 2.5-ish years ago, and they hired a guy by the name of John Stackhouse. So he used to be the editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail,
Yeah.
and the CEO of a bank hired him to do research for him, to feed him information so that it wasn't jaded by bankers, to be honest. Now, the best part about this is at this year's COP, John Stackhouse wrote an article saying Team Canada needs to spend more money at COP and gave Saskatchewan a bunch of credit. Go back about 8 or 9 years and John Stackhouse
Yes.
penned an article,
Front page of the Globe and
front page of the
Mail.
Globe and Mail, Team Canada spends $1 million at COP. What are we doing with taxpayer money?
Yeah.
So we're starting to see a trend in some of the larger companies to helping us tell our story. And we have to, as farmers, we have to work together with these companies. Now, I realize they supply us, and we can have consolidation arguments, etc. But that's the way life is. So we got to play the game with the players we have. So find the ones that you relate with the people, right? I use Ken Seitz as an example. CEO of Nutrien, grew up on a farm in southeast Saskatchewan. I mean, I can go drink beer with him and talk to him just like somebody I played hockey with my whole life, because it's who he is.
Yeah.
And so how do we use those strengths within the big companies, within politics, and within agriculture to start to move forward even more?
Well, and I think we're starting to see that academia is getting involved as well. Like, we've always had industry, primary producers, whether you're fighting or whether you're together on something. But for the first time, we're actually getting those people in the room with academia, with data, and we're actually coming up with solutions rather than just arguments, which I think is one of the biggest moves we've seen.
I didn't know if I was going to go on this rant, but since you said that, once again, let's also remember. So we've everybody in the room's now agreed we need to do a better job of telling our story. Team Canada.
Yeah.
We need to use the Global Institute of Food Security report to use data to explain that we actually are pretty good at what we do, right? And that's all farmers are pretty good at what they do. I forget what the zero-till adoption rate is in Saskatchewan, but it's so close to 100, it's a rounding error, right? So there's the two things. Now, the last thing I would urge that's a pretty important piece of this, how about we try in agriculture urging each other to continue to be better? And actually, maybe at least set up one table at the corner of Tim Hortons where we talk about the positive things farms are doing. Because I believe Tim Hortons is super successful in Canada for farmers to bitch about each other. But I don't just say that in agriculture, right? The one thing we did is some insurance business in the US. And I couldn't believe it, the different mindset. And I got some friends in the crowd that do business in the US too. Like in the US, their belief and love of entrepreneurs is next level. It's like football. And if an entrepreneur that everybody likes goes bankrupt, like they'll crowdfund for that entrepreneur to get started again. And that's the US mindset. And yet in Canada, like we literally have a coffee chain that was made on taking bets on who we hope fails next, or who took Chinese investment, or who's bought out by the mafia.
You're spending too much time at Tim Hortons, Chris.
I don't go at all. They'd have nothing to talk about.
Well, you know too much.
Yeah.
So that would be my last urge, is that I don't know about anybody else, but it's a lot easier to get up in the morning and be positive and think of new ideas. And I mean, it's why we enjoy talking.
Yeah.
Is there's always going to be a few things we disagree on, but the one thing we do agree on is we're in the best goddamn industry in the world, and let's support everybody in that to get farther ahead.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I think, we've talked about it on past podcasts, and obviously we get a lot of good comments and bad comments on it, but the big one for us is that success is as an industry. It's not just individual. So for us, moving forward, seeing changes, whether it's banking, whether it's consolidation, whatever it might be. Some of my strongest farms are the small family farms, and that's awesome. But success just means moving forward, and it doesn't have to be in acres. It can be whichever direction you want to go. For us...
Pause. What's your definition of small? What's the million? How many millions of revenue do they do?
Okay, I'm talking over 10,000. I'll give you that.
No, but 2,500 acre farm in Saskatchewan is going to do north of $1 million of revenue pretty easy.
Yeah.
Like that's less than 1% of businesses in the country.
Yeah.
So we get beat up sometimes on social media when especially when I go down this path of I think there's 170,000 hobby farms. Yeah, that's because they have less than $1 million in revenue. And I'm sorry, in most good businesses, your net margin on EBIT is 20. A really good one's 20 to 25. Average is more like 16. And so unless somebody in this crowd has figured out, so $1 million times 16 is 160 grand. You got to pay your loan payments. You got to pay yourself. I don't know about anybody else, but if a family of 4 can live on less than 100 grand, you figured out something I haven't. That's a job. It's not a business. So when we say small, we're not saying a 2,500 acre small. It's over $1 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're saying a half section small while you have 3 other jobs.
Okay, we got 20 seconds. I want to give you the last word since he's had the last 20. So.
Oh my God. Well, no. First of all, thanks guys for being the middle woman and or the rose between the two thorns, whatever you want to call it. Always enjoy it though, because I have to say you guys have been super kind as I came into the industry, and it's a fun ride. So looking forward to what we're going to continue to do in the future. That's what I have to say.
And remember, that's the truth about ag. Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Hebert Group, which includes Hebert Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.